Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Whip 12 podcast. Today, I'm your host, Thomas, aka Diomedes, and I'm here with a returning guest, a friend of the show, Antipodean Bolt, aka Trent. Welcome. How are you doing, Trent?
Not bad yourself?
Yeah, I can't complain. For me, here on the top of the world, spring is slowly creeping up on us. But I guess for you, it's getting cooler.
Sort of. Because I live in the top end, we're about a week out from a cyclone hitting. So which is gonna be fun.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
It's always fun. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
We just had a whole heap of floods as well. So it's been raining for about a week now, and now I've got a cyclone coming just to really top off that wet season.
The top of Australia is tropical, basically, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So for those of you at home who imagine Australia is just desert, it's really not, obviously.
No.
Okay. So today, dear listener, we are here to talk about, I think it's fair to say, Trent's favorite faction. Certainly my favorite Pano faction. That is the Neoterran Capitoline army. And it's had some new stuff. But before we get into that, Trent, I know you're also a fan of Warcrow. So what have you been doing with your hobby recently?
So I play Hegemony of Embassy. I have been lining up trying to do a podcast for Warcrow itself. With Christmas and all that, it's kind of just been put to the back burner while going back into the work year and so forth. But I'm trying to get my Black Legion back up and running. In addition, I've signed up to BrizCon for an Infinity tournament over in Brisbane. So that's in first week of May on Labor Day. So I'll be probably taking my NCA to that as well. So
very nice. Well, good luck with your podcast. I know all about the struggle.
Getting there. I'll get there. Yeah, I'll get there eventually. Maybe one day.
About the struggles. I know all about the struggles of that. I think the last time I recorded a podcast was, I think, around Christmas time, at which I said to the listeners, I will get this as a live stream and with video and stuff. As you listening, and you are listening, listeners, can tell, it's not on video yet, but it will be eventually. I'm not going to promise.
TM.
But soon TM. Exactly right. Okay, anyway, so we're here to talk about NCA. Do you want to give us a little lowdown on NCA? What's their identity? What's their vibe?
So it has changed a little bit since its re-release, compared to previous editions, especially like going from N3 to N4. The start of N5, it wasn't even in the game, so it's I think completely different beast now. It's in a lot of people would say overpowered spot. I'd say it's probably had the training wheels taken off, brought up to like N4, N5 standards.
Okay.
As well. So it's a completely different beast. It still retains the genetics of apply gun, and if that doesn't work, apply more gun.
Yeah.
And then just to make sure, apply more gun. And if that doesn't work, apply Shona Two-Face and repeat process.
So. Okay. So it's very much the sort of clear the way faction for your guy to like run up and press a button at the end and win the game that way.
Very much so. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And this is obviously Pano. Neoterra, if I remember correctly, is the capital planet of Pano, right? So it's all of the most elite, sort of
highest funded.
Highest funded. That's a good way to put it. It's a very Pano way to put it. The highest funded elements within the Pano military. Okay. Well, how you're saying apply gun? Is there any other elements to their play, or is it really that simple?
That's the core focus of it. Like you now have disco balls in the faction. You have visibility control. You have pitches. and we'll get to the blocker in a little bit,
Mm.
because that is a contentious profile for some people. It's okay, but you have a lot of lateral options now. You've still got the Garuda, for example, the forward observer there. The blades have got a massive glow up with that parachutist engineer. And you've got a few, like the Auxilia have got a massive glow up with their specialists. So the options are still there. You can still play lateral. However, they do prefer to kind of just go, here's a big gun. You either avoid it or deal with it. Either way, you're getting engaged. So,
Okay then. All right. Well, let's jump in with maybe some highlights, shall we say? What would you say are the kind of core pieces? Are there such a thing as core pieces for NCA? The things that you just have to take, or things that you're almost always going to take?
For me personally, a tag. I am playing around with variety of like the Mark II and the Erlan. Max's changes, especially with the price increase, it's a little bit harder to slot in a dual tag list. So it's kind of, which one do I take? But I think you usually start off with your basic building blocks. Like I usually pick 2 Auxilia, starting to potentially favor just one, but I'll usually include the Auxilia as a baseline. From there, I'll obviously add in a tag, but you can apply like a Swiss missile. There was a couple of lists there where I was using the Swiss missile launcher as my primary active piece, just to really mess with people's heads. But
Yeah,
I think it's a lot of So I think it's largely the same in the terms of like you hit your high notes and then you add the grease to the engine to make sure it runs efficiently.
right.
Because otherwise you're just running on a dry surface and you're just realistically not going to get much traction. So you kind of add your key engine parts. Like I'll typically throw in a blocker because he's quite survivable in terms of just being the only hacker that I take, and quite adept at being a defensive hacker as
Okay.
well. So
Well, let's look at the blocker
yeah,
then, shall we? We can focus in on
yeah,
that one for a minute.
yep.
I have the profile up here, and for those of you listening at home, it's a pretty standard light infantry in a lot of ways. You've got your Pano BS12, a nice Whip 13, which is a bit better than you'd expect, Arm 1 BTS 3, and 1 Vita. And then where it really seems to take off is in the equipment or special skills equipment, and then the specific profiles. I guess you were saying a lot of people think that it's a bit a bit OP. You would say. I guess a lot of people would say that with the
It's
specific
the +1 burst.
things like
It's
that.
it's the specific components of the BS attack +1 burst, X visor, and the fact that it's got a picture. So it kind of neutralizes, like puts a net sum over like the -3 on the negative range band because it just ignores that.
Yeah,
So
and
I
it's cheap
have
as well.
used that. Yeah, 19 points and half a swig. Problem is that it's like it doesn't pure link with bolts, which, to be honest, is a bit rough, but it is what it is. But it does pure with Fusiliers, and like the main component you got to consider is that you go from a 15-point Fusilier with no BTS and Whip 12, and pay 4 points, and you get a blocker hacker with a firewall, integrated firewall, Whip 13, and BTS 3. So
Yeah.
the cost investment is by and large, especially for a tag user that will be looking to use him very defensively. So he is just there to repossess tags if I stuff up in any way, fashion. And most of the time, the pictures are there purely so that if I can't get my tag back to a repeater by the end of my turn, I can just send the repeater to the tag.
Okay.
So
Oh, that's nice.
instead
So,
of pulling the tag back, so I send the repeater back, and that way, if at least they start doing a like a total control run or whatever on the Mark II or the Erlang, especially if I can't get the Erlang camoed back up or whatever, things have gone sideways. I just send one of the pictures out and just pop it right near him, so at least I have some mechanism to kind of recover as
all
a
right.
result.
Okay, that's interesting that you view it that way, because I know a lot of people sort of, if you can say, outside the faction, look upon the blocker with the picture and the X visor and the plus burst and just think this is a nightmare for me as the opponent defensively. That the Pano player is just going to stand that blocker up, shoot pitches right into my DZ, and then hack everything, isolate whatever the deal is. But that's not how you would use it typically.
No, I have used it in that fashion. So, but at the same time, he is not a top. He's not a bidding kiss. He is not an anathematic. So he's like an average Joe just walking into a bigger ecosystem. So you got to be very precise in where you go. He's only really coming into his own if you support him with, say, like a Locust Killer Hacker or Hexa Killer Hacker, something that they can't target until you decide to reveal. So they've always got to consider that there's something hiding, ready to jump over the top with a Trinity, for example, or even a Swiss Killer Hacker. Man, I love that Swiss Killer Hacker. So he is just there as a hardline component. So notably, I have like launch pitches. I think it was at Bit, and it was within 8 inches of Victor Messer. I think the
Okay,
hacking
that is
Shaz
that's
dude.
dangerous. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so mind you, I didn't launch it until I dropped the parachutist blade in, and then emitted the Victor first. So then
Okay.
I'm only having to deal. So I've dropped the picture there. I realize if I go to hack Bit and Kiss, I'm going to have to take on 2 fairly quite capable killer hackers there. So I've dropped the parachutist in, isolated one of them, and then proceeded to isolate the other. So I'm still applying shoot. It's just a different way of shooting in that sense.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
So,
That's
but
really
yeah,
it's really
he's
interesting to hear that it's not, because, as I said, the sort of perception is that the blocker is this kind of like hacking dominance piece. But I think you raise a good point that even if you can get you probably will get your picture wherever you want it to go, it's still only whip 13 BTS3 1 wound guy. Like, you can still very
yeah.
easily just lose to a
It's
killer hacker.
still, yeah. So the firewall, if you're attacking it through the pitcher, the firewall upgrade doesn't really matter because you're already coming through the firewall regardless. The firewall comes in handy when like you're inside that 8 inches and can buy it. So it's defensive in that sense. So he hasn't got any bonuses to like actually attacking with his hacking. He just solves more problems with shoot, realistically, and it's just incidental that he has a repeater with him. So I've used his like pulsar and multi pistol far more. Like an adhesive launcher rifle is like burst 4 inactive. Or no,
That's a really
yeah,
good point. Yeah.
so
4
2,
dice with an adhesive launcher
3, and
rifle is
then
actually pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so he's and BS attack +1 burst includes his flash pulse as well.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, that's also
So
significant.
and the X visor means he's like whip 13 and so forth. Like He's fair. He's got what burst, what 1+, stuff. So it's not necessarily just the hacking component, it's also the shooting. So he can back it up and actually do forks. For me, he's more of a defensive piece rather than an offensive piece in that sense.
Any call for the specialist operative profile, which is basically the same, just not a hacker?
Yeah, you could potentially use it. Like, it just means that he's closing down that loophole of being hackable. So he's perfectly serviceable. He still only gets one button attempt. So it's still fairly capable, and you can slot it into a CSU, Duo, and be pure or whatever. So perfectly capable if you need to cut those points, but you still want his shooting capability as a result of it. Because like he's got a discover reroll sensor, and then you can put him in a 3-man Fusey Harris, which gonna get him whip 16 plus sensor plus discover reroll with an X visor.
Yeah, I mean, you're pretty much guaranteed.
It's effectively pseudo like MSV3 pseudo in terms of discovery. So, but yeah, he's definitely a defensive piece for me because like he puts a bubble there, and if somebody's like trying to deploy, what's that JSA lady? Shinobu.
Oh, Shinobu,
Out in front. I'll usually activate him and just go sweep and just go, and there's nobody nearby, and proceed to push on with the tag and whatnot. So
yeah, that is quite an amazing little package, really, when you think about it like that. I mean, the headline is, "Oh, you've got this hacker with this incredible picture," but to your point, you really don't need to do that to get value out of it. Having whip, as you say, whip 16 if you're in a Fusilier Harris, +6
with sensor.
on discover. Yeah, with the sensor discover, you get +6, so you're just automatically discovering. So if you can get yourself into a good position on a camo marker, it's just like discover shoot. Like you have a multi-pistol, so maybe you can't kill it, but you can very much glue it, or flash pulse it or whatever.
100%.
Yeah. Cool. Nice. Okay. What do we have next then in terms of core pieces? You mentioned earlier the Swiss Guard. Should we have a little look at that one?
So yeah, we can have a look at that one. It's not necessarily a core piece, but it is something I'm wanting to. It's mainly like you can go on all day about how good the missile launcher is and the heavy machine gun. Reliable, self-explanatory profiles. Hacking device, same. Like those are tried and tested profiles that are good to go. My one that I'm really trying to fit in certain lists is the Killer Hacker Swiss Guard.
Okay. With forward deployment.
It's
okay.
Yes, +4. So I'll usually pair him with Sasha so that I can deploy her and get a gauge of where the Swiss Guard can go as a result. So I have taken him in one game. I faced, I think, Starco with it, and he just kept face tanking Uhahu's Oblivions prior to being shot. Yeah.
For those of you listening at home and aren't aware of what the Swiss Guard is, I imagine pretty much everyone is, but just to give a quick lowdown, it is a heavy infantry, very famous, 4/4 movement, CC 15, which is not amazing, but we'll get onto a little bit of an adjustment for that later. The big numbers are BS 15, Fizz 14, Whip 13, Arm 5, BTS 6, and Vita 2, with camouflage, hidden deployment, mimetism -6, stealth, and surprise attack -3. It's a pretty incredible profile. I mean, it's been like that now for 3 editions, so, some version of that anyway. That's the basic same thing. And as you say, the number one kind of pick nowadays is the missile launcher, which gets +1 special die on its shots, which means as an ARO piece or even as an active piece now, it's kind of incredible.
Rolling 2 dice.
Yeah, 2 dice in ARO without the need of a fire team. I mean, you'll pay 60 points for that.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, I've certainly had this experience playing Pano, even in N4 times before this update, where that piece would just stop a whole turn. You know, you stick it up on a roof somewhere, and yeah, you reveal it when something comes to try and push a button or something, and all of a sudden, your opponent's turn is shot to pieces. You don't even need to kill anything. It's just like, now I'm
Yeah.
just throwing these 15 dice at you, BS 15 dice
Yeah.
or die. And yeah, pretty incredible. But you're going more for the
Yeah.
killer hacker, which again, for the listeners at home, is a little bit different. It's AP, submachine gun, pulsar, Flammenspeer, Timbot, firewall -3, with a killer hacking device, forward deployment +4 inches, and also martial arts level 1 with a CC of 21. So it's got a little bit of CC chops. That's alongside an AP CCW, so it's not like incredible, but it's PS6, so it will
Yeah.
definitely hurt something. So yeah, you're saying you're using that with the Sasha.
Yeah. So the Sasha is just there to kind of get me a marker, so I don't actually have to give away the fact that I've got a forward deployment +4 Swiss Guard. So I'll use the other models to kind of go, hey, I can slot this one right here, and just kind of gauge where I'm going to deploy it. So I'm using that model as a testing ground to see where I can put the Swiss Guard and my rough, so wherever I'm gauging line of sight from, and I can use the Sasha to justify getting that. And then I'll, in private, put the Swiss Guard in the ideal spot, because he can functionally act as a ranged ARO with that Flammenspeer. He can act as a close range ARO with that Pulsar. He basically has a tool for largely every kind of function you kind of want him to do. He's got the AP submachine gun, so he can go into suppressive. He's got a KHD with a automatic tinbot, so largely, even if he goes inside an opponent's zone of control, he's by and large BTS 9 effectively, which allows him to tank a lot of punishment, especially with stealth. He can slip through some of the options, and then having camouflage organically, and then the option of switching over to a cyber mask as well. So he's very much able to kind of just pivot. So he doesn't have great skills in a lot of areas. Like, he's not very specialized. He's more of a multi-role function, where he can just kind of pivot on a dime and go, okay, I need to actually go into a gunfighting mode or a close assault mode and get after that. So, and then he can push buttons as well. So, like, he's not great in any one function, but he's great in like lots. He's okay in lots of little functions by comparison.
Yeah. Do you? I mean, it's 47 points. Do you find the price is prohibitive in any way, or is it not? It feels
Just
a
depends on the
much,
build.
but, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So occasionally, it can get a little bit pricey. But I've found the fact that, like, 6 orders, he's just, I'm just going to Trinity. Like, through a repeater, he's just +3, -3, and he's just going, okay, I lost. I'm just going to take a BTS 9 save. Cool, done.
Yeah.
So because he just tanks. He'll just keep tanking and tanking and tanking, and like eventually he's going to get something through, and that's what he did. He eventually got a wound through onto Uahu,
Yeah.
the little kid
That one.
script kitty.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Where 6 orders later, all that's occurred is Uahu's gone to NWY. So he just soaks the damage. BTS Arm 5, BTS 6, like, he can very much be supported by, because what I was doing, I was taking the killer hacker and the Swiss missile launcher. So you got the specialist and the long range gun, and they'll kind of just tanding off one another realistically. So
Nice.
I've kind of kept getting shot just through bad luck, and my luck with heavy infantry just forced me back to tags. So because they can soak a little bit more damage. But that's just
Sure.
purely to poor play occasionally, or being a little bit overconfident purely because I'm more familiar with tags and being able to just brute force through. But I'm wanting to give him another run for his money as well. So
Cool. Nice. What should we look at next? You did also mention the auxilia as another key thing that you use a lot of.
So the auxilia is there's only like with the removal of like the specialist bonuses and the missions, being able to make multiple die rolls on a button is relatively important, and there's only a few, maybe one outside of Pano that I know of, and that's the Puppet Master in Nomads. So currently, Auxilia and Drummers are the only ones that have a specialist with a synchronized specialist
Yeah.
attached to them. So when you go up to push a button and they're both in contact, you're getting 2 dice rolls. And then if you
Yeah.
get operational learning, they're getting 4 dice rolls.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty
So
big. I mean, it's
yeah, exactly. Like even if you're just applying more burst to a problem as opposed to getting better at the problem, you're just button mashing until the
I
problem
do
goes away.
I do love that's a very Plano approach. Like, well,
Exactly.
how do we win other things? Well, we apply more burst. So how do we push this button? Well, we just push it more. Do more pushing on
Yeah,
the button. Yeah, yeah. That's good.
pretty much. Yeah. So that, and they gained 360 visor and mimetism on the Oxbots, and a 360 visor with a pocket heavy flamethrower and a flash pulse is, to be honest, still fairly worth it.
That's that
Even
is
though
big.
it's like 7 points. So,
Yeah, I mean, if you're coming up
so
against like Morats or something like that, where you might expect
Mhm.
them to drop a ridiculous AD trooper on you, like,
Yep.
oh well, big deal. I can stick this along the
Yeah,
side where it
exactly.
might come in, and it's never going to come on the board, basically. Or if it does, it's going to
Yeah,
probably die.
so even if you don't take the blocker, like if you run it, if you don't manage to land the blockers, pitches, for example, you can still use the auxilia for observers with the Oxbot and get 2 repeaters down. Yeah, it takes some positioning, and they'll probably be relatively overlapping, but at least there's still a level. Like you're going to have about 6 repeaters just on one profile there. If you take 2, there's 12. So you're going to
Yeah,
have a supply of repeater coverage in that instance. So, and even then, like the lieutenant profiles and the general ones, like they've picked up a template, the nanopulsar +1 burst, which means that you're going to deal with a heavy flamer in against your armor, and then a burst 1 or burst 2 nanopulsar against your BTS, or he can just shoot you with his combi rifle, one of the two. So he's got
yeah.
options there in that instance. So
It's a pretty value package. I mean, just to rewind slightly, looking at the profile, I mean, they're very basic garrison troop, light infantry, full move, CC 16, BS 11, which is low for Pano, Fizz 10, also low, Whip 12. Pretty basic, unarmed, no BTS and one wound. But they are cheap, like 15 to 18 points, and you're getting a lot for that. Loads of templates, flash
yeah.
pulses, all that kind of stuff. I must say I've been quite impressed by the Auxilia. They are,
Mhm.
yeah. To your point, I can see why you put them in the list. Be one of the first things in any given list because they just are such good value for what you're getting or what you're paying.
Excellent. Yeah, they are. So it's kind of um, like the fact that you get an extra body, because we don't have a lot of, I guess, expendable Daylami esque units in the NCA. You
No.
kind of have to find an alternate to fit that role, which the Oxbots tend to do. So you can just throw them into a combat, and then you just shoot into the combat. And if you lose an Oxbot, so what? So
Yeah.
um, it's kind of they fit that almost warband expendable like Mutuia Kumbika type function for us. So it's good to kind of plug that gap, even if you have to take a little bit of a hit on BS11, but like you're rolling up. So because the Auxilia is forward observer, they get forward observer skill. So does the Oxbot, which means you've effectively burst 4 against one target. If you need to.
That's pretty good. Yeah, even
Which
with
means you like
high mimetism kind of targets. I mean, it's whip 12 and whip 11. You might miss, but with 4 dice, you're sort of crit fishing, aren't you? Really, with that, even on a mimetism piece.
And because they don't take saves, it's just all right. Well, now I've got +3, and now, especially if you're able to kind of catch them out of cover, that auxiliary is now ballistic skill 17. You've got a heavy flamethrower or a flash pulse coming down range as well at like whip 17 with that flash pulse. So on the Oxbot or the heavy flamethrower is just forcing you to either dodge or whatever. So they're a good little workhorse again. So the I guess the spice with NCA is getting those little profiles that keep the engine running smoothly. Not so much the flashiness components, but more the workhorse, like the nuts and bolts components, because they get the job done for you.
Nice. Okay. Should we move on then? Have we got any other key pieces in there? I guess in that we say in the S2 kind of range. We'll maybe save the tags for a minute because they feel like they are the headline. Who else is good?
So there's the blade ops, obviously. They're fairly stock standard. My preferred one is the parachutist one. I attach a power bot onto it. I put the parachutist up in the sky, deploy the power bot. Power bot sits disconnected until the blade lands, and then I get to work. So because a lot of my lists include tags, I want a mechanism, especially the red eye, a mechanism to recover them. So having that component, the recovery mechanism is a high value target that the opponent's going to go after. So I want to protect that. So I'll pay the extra points to get that protection on the blade ops, and you just can't target it until. So I spend the regular order, land him, and then I spend the tactical awareness order, getting to work. Or he just comes in and starts making a mess of people in the back. So apart from that, then you've got the Hexa. Hexa is glorious now. It's always been glorious. Hexa is just even more glorious, especially with the recent counterintelligence changes of the latest update. So
Also,
previously
a classic model as well. The sniper is a real classic.
I use the limited edition now sniper because he is technically a Hexa sniper.
Also a very cool model.
So the Hexa picked up +1 BS, so bumped up to BS 13. It has picked up counterintelligence as well, and my preferred profile is a multi-sniper. And it's picked up an extra PS one, extra PS, and they've picked up silent pistols, which are like +1 burst. So I'll typically take that multi-sniper, both as my ARO and a pivot active piece, especially if one of my primary gunfighters are out of location, where the Hexa is in location. He is taken a number of heads now, so I am a massive fan of the Hexa. The BS13 MIM6 surprise attack PS4 DA is just wrecks people at times. So
yeah, it feels like a very. I mean, I have I have a soft spot for snipers. I know they have a a bit of a mixed reputation amongst a lot of the online community because you're shooting just 2 dice inactive. That there's a huge scope for you to
Yeah.
miss those, but with min -6 surprise attack range, like you maybe won't hit, but you definitely won't be hit back. You have to get very
Yeah.
unlucky for that to happen.
Definitely. Exactly.
And
Yeah, keep going.
I was just going to say the counterintelligence really surprised me as a thing, and there was a bit of a not controversy is not the right word, but a bit of uncertainty when it first dropped because it's like, well, if it's a hidden deployment unit, can you use counterintelligence? And I think we got some confirmation that you definitely can, which does.
Well, so
Perhaps,
the
no, go
yeah.
on.
So just to interject there, the rules were is that it must have been deployed on the table as a model or a marker. So
Okay.
the it couldn't be used in a hidden deployment state. So people were like, why give a hidden like a model that prefers being in a hidden deployment counterintelligence, thereby forcing it out of hidden deployment?
Yeah.
But the change occurred where it just needs to exist in your list now. Whereas so now you can have hidden deployment in with counterintelligence,
Okay.
and it's just
Cool.
like it kind of gives away like especially if your opponent goes to strip that order, it gives away that you've got a hexa, and that kind of contributes a little bit. So you're giving away a bit of a surprise, but at the same time, you're making your opponent now consider the fact that there's a hexa
Somewhere, yeah.
sneaking somewhere on the table, and
Yeah,
you
and they
don't
still
have to
don't
do that
know.
work for. So
Yeah. Yeah, they still don't know which profile it is. I suppose you might guess the sniper. At which
yeah,
point, I don't know, there's the one thing of like, yeah, you're telegraphing it exists, but then they're all a similar price point, so it'd be very hard to calculate which
Mhm.
specific one it is. And then
yeah,
thereafterwards, you're in a position where, okay, your opponent now knows. I mean, they will have seen a gap in your list, but they know there's a
yeah,
hexa not there somewhere. So then they're going to start trying to play around it. Like you're going to be thinking, oh gosh, where is it? Where is it? And maybe I'll have to throw some smoke somewhere just to cover, just in case.
yeah,
So as much as it's giving it away, it's also giving you a little bit of a sort of psychological play to mess with as well.
yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So other S2 units, you kind of got your fairly standard machinist is their good workhorse. I'm a bit conflicted on the divas. This is just a personal approach. They can
Yeah.
only link with CSUs, and they're not even pure.
Hmm.
With
They're pretty
15 is
capable.
okay.
Yeah, pretty capable
Yeah,
specialists.
it's just I like I just throw it Auxilia, but with burst 2 at it
Yeah,
on the
that's fair.
on an objective, or like the fact that the divas are in the same price point as a Hexa killer hacker or a Locust killer hacker.
Hmm.
And for me, the key difference is the fact that they can't be targeted until I decide to reveal in that instance, unless I've already been sensor swept out of H2E. Whereas the divas, a known entity, you can contain it, you can control it because you've got all the information there. There's no ambiguity and no doubt in that. It's like, okay, there's the diva. Me personally, it doesn't fit my personal play style. Some people like it, some people don't. Just for me, I was looking at getting the LT profiles up until they removed them, so they just don't fit my personal risk tolerance or play style. So I just don't tend to take them.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair. That's fair.
Hannibal, Hannibal is nice. I want to take him more often. I just don't. I haven't gotten around to him. I keep swapping him in and out with Richard Quinn. So
He's gotten a real interesting new selection of skills and stuff into N5, which I was quite surprised by. I mean, I
yeah,
pour one out for a foreign company who he was the leader of. He now gets to, he now it doesn't have his own his own mercenary company and has to just go and work for loads of other
Yep.
people,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But he's got some a real like suite of skills and stuff, which is
Yes.
quite interesting. How do you
Yes.
feel about him? Because he's sort of got a lot of shooting
I
skills,
like.
but he's definitely not high
Yeah.
watermark, but he is good. So how do you sort
Yeah.
of feel like he fits in?
Well, I feel he fits in, especially if you because I get swit capped very, very quickly of late. Um, and that multi-marksman rifle profile for me like slots straight in there. So he's got NWI, immune shock. So I'm getting a relatively unhackable 2 wound gunfighter BS13 with BS attack +1 SD. So he's effectively burst 5 in a 2-man bolt team, for example.
Mm,
Um, and then like you add in the fact that he's got whip 14. Sure, he's not a specialist, doesn't matter too much, but he's then got sensor, and it's not too
yeah.
hard to actually get a bolt paramedic and a bolt machinist slotted straight in there, or a blade engineer, for example. So then you've got his tactical awareness order, the blade engineer's tactical awareness order, or even just a standard blade. And then you just chuck in a bolt paramedic there. And he's now whip 17 base for discover, and then sensor he is whip 23.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways of kind of going, okay, well, I'm gonna whip 23 you and then 5 dice with a multi-marksman rifle. Yeah, PS7, sure, but eventually PS like +1 5 dice is going to connect and probably drag something down. So
Yeah, and you've
I
got
am planning
API,
on.
don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I am planning on getting around to using him. It's just the current missions for the various tournaments that are lining up. He's just not quite slotting in as cleanly as I would like.
Sure. Do you feel like
That's just
oh, go on.
go.
I was going to say, do you feel like the strategic deployment profiles have any legs? I mean, you're saying you're SWC constrained often, and he gives you +1 at the cost of
The
32 points.
+1 had so yes, but at the same time, at what cost? So
Hmm.
I have used him in a ton of like that specific profile in a ton of beam lists where I take a Swiss Guard missile launcher, 2 Clipper guided remotes, um, and then I just build whatever around him.
Sure.
Because the Swiss Guard guided is a mod to BS attack. The special die doesn't get removed during a coordinated shoot. So the blocker will punch out those pitches. For whatever reason, I managed to and then the auxiliary will also attempt to do targeted. And then the Swiss Guard will open up with 2 dice, and then I've got guided coming in from either side. Meme list mainly, but there is the option of that. But I have tried it. The 3 point. So realistically, he gets +1 SWIC for 3 points. Strategic deployment is he's got tactical awareness, so it's like he's kind of already paid for that 4 inches regardless.
Sure.
But who knows? It's worth trialing. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's definitely worth trying. I want to get around to it. I have thought about it, especially considering how much cheaper it is to get that +1 SWIC compared to the Aquila LT, for example. So yeah.
It's an interesting. I mean, we called up Hannibal and also the blocker, and both of them have neither of them have MSV, which is kind of obviously the kind of traditional piece of equipment or the most highly valued piece of equipment to take on mimetism targets and camo and stuff. But then with this kind of thing, like the sensor on Hannibal with Whip 14, as you say, in a Harris, you're automatically discovering anything in anything in cover. You go automatically discovering anything mimetism 3 that's not in cover, and then it's 17 if it is in cover. Like that's surprisingly potent, and like with
So
BS13 and the weight
plus,
of dice,
yeah,
he's gonna take out stuff like you sort of typical mimetism -3 skirmisher in midfield. He should be able to handily deal with those, really.
yeah, exactly. So next is Uma Sorensen. She's taken a bit of a hit in terms of popularity, but she still provides a role. She's just not, as I said in the Discord, she's just not as flashy as the other options like the Locust is now. Um, she's a reliable workhorse for me. She's still got climbing plus. She's picked up like specialist operative just in a no, she's already had that. Picked up stealth as well, I think. Combat instinct definitely. So she's just a reliable workhorse. Got like silenced pistols +1 burst as well, which is the indicator of like hexahedron work.
Sure.
So yeah, it's to me she's just a reliable workhorse, veteran, medium infantry, capable of doing like a variety of different classifieds. So there's
Yeah,
nothing
for
wrong with her. It's
for a
just
camo piece, she does. Usually a camo kind of skirmisher is like skirmisher, so you don't get any benefits from that. They're usually like they if they are a special, like a specifically a forward observer or hacker, then they do those things, but otherwise they don't really do anything else. Being a
yeah,
medium infantry and a character and a specialist operative with a range of different things. I was really surprised when you said that she's sort of a bit, a sort of unglamorous, because to my eyes,
yeah,
she's a little bit pricey, but she looks like she can achieve a lot as a camo piece, definitely.
yes, because she's got surprise attack, camouflage, full deployment +8, like a reliable workhorse. I have used the breaker combi to some
Hmm.
use back in a previous edition as well, because like she pops out and she'll be joining part of the a bolt team, and she just opens up with that, especially now that she's got an X visor. Breaker combi is like basically zeros, and you come out to the side of like a tag that only has BTS 6, and she's
Yeah.
able to kind of engage those mechanisms separately. So solid workhorse. I still like her. It's just trying to figure out the trialing the new toys, so to speak, at the moment. So
Sure. Sure.
bolts. I love the fact that they have given the non-swick bolts drop bears. That has been 100% request that I've wanted, because especially in a lot of my multi-bolt lists, every bolt needed to be working, especially the LT and the chain of command. Like they needed to be working rather than just bringing combi rifle and a light shotgun. They needed to be doing
Yeah.
something more to justify their presence in a fire team, and now they do. The paramedics picked up drop bears, for example, as well. So
Yeah,
you
they're
can't go
kind of
wrong.
they're a little bit cheaper as well at N5, and I think
Mm-hmm.
even I mean when I look at them, I'm sort of reaching for the killer hacker, alongside the classic sort of sniper and
Yeah.
Spitfire. But even the non-specialist version of that killer hacker profile is just avoiding shotgun +1 burst. That one has drop bears for 19 points. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can even run it by itself. Like just send him running along, fairly cheap, very deadly. Throw a drop bear, run around a corner, burst 3 with marksmanship into whatever you're shooting at. Like, yes,
Yeah,
please.
exactly.
That's great value.
So there's a common setup. Like you can do it 2 by now that like you can go AVA total with bolts, which is glorious.
Yeah.
You take 2 Spitfire bulleteers, either one KHD bolt and then one normal hacking device bolt, and then blade engineers for both teams. Job done.
Okay.
And you've got 2 small multiple units that are able to just push forward, attack awareness, localized support, able to exploit the you know the repeater from the bulleteer and whatnot. So it's all a self-contained package, capable of achieving a lot of things. So, but yeah,
This
Optimus.
when I look at the when I look at the bolts, I do wonder. I know you said earlier on one of the headlines for these guys is tags for the faction. I mean, is
Yeah.
Ulan and all that kind of stuff. But it does feel like looking at this the faction as a whole, the stuff that we've gone through. There's a huge amount of variety and ways that you can play like without leaning on tags. Of course, you want to because they're really good. But if you don't own the model or you don't want to just mix it up, then you can really do that in a big way.
Oh, 100%. Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of depth to the faction now as well. So um, it's just ultimately picking the right tools for the right job in certain specs and still accounting for the vanity picks as well. So we're kind of getting into a lot of it's just all the workhorses like that. There's nothing flashy, feast or famine a lot of the time. It's just solid, reliable, consistent workhorses in a lot of these profiles. Maximus, I'm still gauging him out.
This is Agent Maximus.
The Agent Maximus, yeah. I'm still gauging him. I like him, but that's just me.
You might be the only one.
The options, yeah. I like the options that he brings as well. So it's just a matter of finding his spot. Because he is able to join Fusiliers, and then he's basically got a burst 5 Thunderbolt there, and he's one of the far and few between close quarter specialists that they can really mix it up with some of the heavy hitters in that regards. So yeah, he's not great and he doesn't have martial arts, but he's got CC attack -6 and CC 23. Like BS 12 hurts him a little bit in that space, but I can see where I'd use him. It's just trying to fit him in. 40 points is pretty pricey though. But I love Max anyway. Shona. Yeah.
Oh, Shona.
Shona.
Always good.
Shona's Shona.
Yeah. CC monster.
Love Shona.
She is one of the best CC units in the game, right? She must be up there.
She'd probably
Certainly
be in the top 5. Yeah, she'd probably be up there in the top 5 at least. I don't know if she'd be the number 1 because she's still viable to like natural born warrior and like the martial arts and all that CC attack minus jazz. But like you pick the right target. She's CC 26. What? 2 true burst. Yeah, 2 true burst.
Yeah.
And still PS4 like
AP explosive.
Now that she's got immunity shock, yeah. She's still got immunity shock and NWI now. Frenzy is kind of a moot point. So, but
yeah,
sure enough, she moves like 10 inches a turn if you don't want to dodge. If you dodge, she goes about 12. So she hooks. Medium infantry now as well. So she can still do classifieds, being veteran and medium infantry as well.
Yeah. Yeah, this is on a move 6-2 for the super jump, which is why she's going quite so fast. I mean, even I would say she's also quite cheap, like 22 points. It's not something you want to throw away exactly, but if you find yourself in a situation where there's a tag on the other side of the table, and it absolutely you need to kill it. It's like somewhere in the midfield that's like blocking your path. Like you could just if you get her into CC, you might well just delete it. And she might die on the way in, but you've unlocked something with her.
Yeah, I've had instances where she's absolutely just dropped the ball, but she's succeeded in just running the ball through somebody's brain pan more often than not. And I've had opponents where it's like the moment I put Shona down, all efforts go towards getting her because they know, especially ones that have used her, go towards getting her off the table.
Sure.
Because I get a bit cheeky, especially with the HVT missions. I'll run her up, grab my HVTs that I've deployed, and then bring them back into my DZ with her, and then send her back out.
Nice.
So yeah, bodyguard work. It makes sense.
Cool.
So, Quilla Guard, meta pick. I like them. They got disco balls in the specialist profiles. Heavy machine gun, can't go wrong with a like BS15 MSV3 piece. So it
I
is.
have a real soft spot for the Lieutenant Strategos level 1
Yep.
profile. I'm not an NCA main by any stretch, but I do have the models and I do sort of mess with them sometimes. And I really want to run that guy because it's just Strategos is a nice rule, and then just by himself, he's almost a fire team in a can. Like great gunfighting, viz control, press buttons. Like
He's
what's not
got
to love?
deactivator.
Yeah,
He ignores smoke and applies his own visibility control. So he's fairly solid.
Yeah.
I like him too. I haven't managed to take him yet. It's just my mechanisms of list building.
Sure.
He goes in,
I mean, it's
comes
expensive
out,
as well.
goes in, comes out.
Yeah.
So he'll eventually get in depending upon what I'm fighting as well. So orc troops are orc troops. Solid, reliable, nothing too flashy.
Yeah, they have like you have the really sort of vanilla orc troops here for NCA, which I was a little bit disappointed by, just because everyone else gets their own flavor, and it's like, well, shouldn't NCA have a special core of like not super orcs necessarily, but with some extra bit of equipment or a different kind of skill or whatever would be nice.
Yeah. Yes. At the same time, you kind of got the Aquila Guard and Swiss Guard there.
That's true.
So you kind of have to balance it out a little bit. Otherwise, yeah. But they're still fairly solid. It sucks that we lost by Pandra out of this, because by Pandra with an Aquila Guard and a Bolt would be glorious. But yeah. And we're about to... So I imagine we're going to leave the tags till last. So I love the fact that the Pathfinder has tactical awareness and is a wild card in NCA now. I attach it to my tag a lot. As well, you can't go wrong with like Peacemaker. I prefer the +1 burst with the Oxbot, the 27-point Peacemaker. It has like the mine layer is okay, and it does what it says on the box. Like you drop it out, but I kind of got a little bit addicted to the fact that the Peacemaker plus BS attack +1 burst with the Oxbot goes a little bit hard, because you've got a burst 3 boarding shotgun, burst 2 pulsar, and then a Oxbot on top, which also still has shock mines that it can deploy if required.
Yeah, that's fair.
So
it was interesting. I was listening to your compatriots the other day on the Loss of Lieutenant podcast, and they were very stridently against going anywhere other than the mine layer profile. But I agree with you. I'd sort of like, after listening to them talk, I was like, oh yeah, +1 is nice, but mine layer is very cool in the midfield. But +1 is still +1. BS attack.
Yeah, it's more of a defensive piece with that mine layer, which is solid. But like rolling up, because you can still apply marksmanship to the Peacemaker, and then you're just rolling up with a burst 3 boarding shotgun at like BS 18 with a flamer. So
yeah, you can't.
For me, it was just that interdiction. Yeah, exactly. So it was just that interdiction piece. The other bots, like the Gruder, Rob Cantrell speaks wonders of the Gruder.
Yeah,
being the best flyer in the game.
Yeah.
It's still not a flyer, Rob. That's still not a flyer.
No, it's not.
It's a very fast jumper.
Yeah, I for long-time listeners will probably know that I'm a huge OSS player, and I can't say anything bad against the Garuda. The Spitfire is in almost all of my lists. I mean, obviously, NCA has a wealth of good shooters, but in OSS, it's not quite the same. So like Spitfire Garuda does the job that a Dakini HMG can do, but do it faster and better. Even in, I would say, NCA, like you can make space for it because it's not that expensive and it's just so fast.
Yeah. in early builds, when I was still rolling back over to NCA, I was taking the gritter just to try it out. It wasn't fitting for my preferred playstyle, but there are definitely times where I'm like, I really would like a Garuda just to be able to push the button. My preferred approach is the Garuda Forward Observer for obvious reasons, just being able to drop it in the side and go 10 inches and bam, done.
Yeah.
Push button. Go on. Moving on to Locust, fairly solid. Can't say anything bad about them now. They've kind of taken the wind out of the sail of the knocking in Svalheimer. But like the breaker combi, decharges pitcher, like he's a classified doing machine.
This is in hacker and killer hacker flavors as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
the
you can
killer
do
hacker.
either.
Yeah, so they're all hidden deployment now as well. So
They went
and
through a
then
bit. Was it the start of N5? They had camo one use, all of them, and then they took that away and they've given you one. There was a couple of. I remember looking at them being like, they're cool. They've changed and they got better, and then they changed again and they were still good but different.
But now they're getting hidden deployment and they've taken away the camo component, and they've also moved from infiltrate to forward deployment +8.
Oh yeah, okay.
Which is much of a muchness. Occasionally, I'd prefer the infiltrate because being able to rock up with like hidden deployment, put it on somebody's deployment zone with a wild parrot and just drop it there, and it's like good luck. I suspect it's because you don't really want an infiltrating pitcher. That's just me.
Yeah, perhaps.
So it is what it is. So which leaves the tags and the red eye to talk about as well.
Okay. Well, one thing, just with the Locust, what do you reckon with the SMG Wild Parrot? You were mentioned that. It does seem like a pretty cool setup.
Yeah, so you could like there's entirely possible that you can still like roll for that -6. So you can try for that like over the line effectively, but with the full deployment, like you can just hit and deploy that bad boy and somebody walks past and you just chuck a wild parrot out. It's like, all right, what's your next move?
Yeah.
My preferred is the Locust Killer Hacker. I keep getting him into trouble. That's just a user error problem. Because
it's
a
nice you
stealth
can back into
a mask,
state. Yeah.
Yeah. I just keep getting him into trouble and then I can't get him out of it. So ultimately it comes down to user error. But I like him. It's just at the moment, I think with the mission that I'm coming with, I think even just trying to find that one more point for him, Uma slots in a little bit better for the current lists that I've sent you as well. So,
what about the multi-marksman rifle? I feel like it's one of the more powerful guns you can get on a forward deploying unit.
Definitely,
but I rarely see it or hear it talked about.
Yeah, I reckon he'd be able to do some good work with there because hidden deployment, like he won't have a marker state, but definitely that first turn where he comes out of hidden deployment, he'll get surprise attack. That being said, you still get surprise attack coming out of cyber mask as well. But the multi marksman, like he definitely gets some work done catching people out of cover in the back and so forth in that regards, and he still retains a boarding pistol, so he's got that ability to do close range forks as well. So, but yeah, no, he'd definitely be able to kind of really start stacking up and be a counter skirmisher, like skirmisher effectively. He'd be able to kind of interdict those people looking to push in that area.
Nice. Okay, so yes, let's talk about the tags, the big stuff, the cool things. I would say we've talked about a little bit about how people complain about the blocker, but I don't think they complain anywhere near as much as they do.
Do you want to talk about the Erlang, because the Mark II is fairly reliable. It's a good to go workhorse. You just stick a usually take the multi-HMG NCO and you just stick a Pathfinder to it and you're just rolling in five orders in that round.
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's
the one that's got
value, but-
everyone off tilt, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone that's got everyone off tilt is Yerland. So, how to unpack this? Basically, they just took the bolts and gave him a tag.
Yeah, okay. I like that.
Without the marksmanship. So 6'4", standard CC 15, BS 15, standard Pano tag profile. Fizz 15, whip 12, so it doesn't get that whip 13 that the Squallow does now. Arm 6, BTS 6, 3 structure. It's a standard Stingray class profile. BS attack, standard camouflage, courage, dodge, all that good jazz. Mim 3, Red and Prez, surprise attack -3, tactical awareness, and the spicy one is the Warhorse component. And then you got 2 profiles. Yeah, exactly, and camouflage. So this one is typically my anto info, like my tag that I take if I'm expecting a heavy info war, or a heavy CC faction, typically, because the camouflage state will protect it from those lines of play. So I initially was trialing the Spitfire heavy rocket launcher, and my recent list does go back to that, but in a different fashion. So the Spitfire one is a Group 1 tag from just the initial testing that we've done, and the Fuel Bark remains like the ideal Group 2 tag, with the Fuel Bark, Panzerfaust, and Blitzen. So the times where I've used... Yeah, exactly. So the BS attack, this is where people have issues with this profile. It's 80 points. I can understand why they probably feel that it might be a little bit underpowered. Spitfire, heavy rocket launcher.
Sorry, 80 points is still a lot to pay for a tag, I feel like.
Yeah, exactly.
It's perhaps a little cheap, but it's making a big dent in your list with 80 points.
Yeah, exactly. So it has a Spitfire, which is basically an AP Spitfire and an AP HRL +1 burst, with Warhorse, so it ignores the BS attack -3 component. When I've found using it, the range bands aren't the fact that your 24 to 32 range band is not quite as high burst. Like, yes, you still got the Fuel Bark, but the Fuel Bark's Fuel Bark. Like, you kind of just sit back, and if you've got a particularly harder fight, you'll leverage those 0 range bands, and you're effectively running it like a sniper. So you kind of just take small peaks, shoot, pull back. Whereas the Spitfire and the heavy rocket launcher kind of compete for roles. One wants you to advance, where the heavy rocket launcher kind of wants you to sit in that mid-range component as well. And I found that more often than not, I was getting in competing range bands when having to respond to stuff with the Spitfire component. But I was still using it in the approach as a Group 2 tag, like a fire support gun piece role, rather than than the Group 1 tag, where it's kind of replacing almost like a bulleteer or something like that. So it pushes into the forward line of effort, and it just uses that heavy rocket launcher to force people to get their heads down, and gets into it with the Spitfire in that instance. So I like it. I've always liked Erlands. They've always had, Erlands are terrible, because why take an Erland when you can just take a cutter? It's like, because NCA doesn't get a cutter, for starters. But ultimately, you can see the clear difference. And a terrible tag pilot player, like, is still going to, like, if you overextend, you're still going to get your tag dead. You leave it out of cover, or leave it out of camo, a CC monster is just going to run up and take it out anyway. Like, the same the same mechanisms in order to get after it is there. It's just has a higher threat profile in that instance. So it's like a PS5 heavy rocket launcher with AP.
Yeah.
There's a
Ignoring
lot of
cover.
heavy rocket launcher. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of heavy rocket launcher tags with AP. Pano's just like, well, we've got more money than you, so we'll make a better one.
Yeah.
So it's just an extension of that. Um, so yeah,
So
I like it.
do you think it deserves its controversial reputation, or is it not quite up to that standard?
I don't. So the biggest issue I think people have with it is the fact that it's Warhorse, so therefore it's immune to isolation. Um, I think that's an incidental component, because it's still capable of getting total controlled. It's still capable of getting stun locked and immobilized and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's I say it openly,
Isolation,
it's
yeah,
BTS 6 is like it's decent. I suppose it'd be 9 in cover
it's
against some guns, but it's
yeah,
not against hacking. It's not against mines or templates.
yeah,
It's BTS 6 is good, but it's not like it's not the high watermark for tags or even for
yeah.
HI in that respect.
So yes, it just means that there's lines of play that it kind of neutralizes in concert with the camouflage. Um, because one way of locking it down, not that I found it was an issue anyway, when people tried to put isolation and then immobilization onto it, I just literally usually ran a power bot in one order, just turn it off and on again, and the Erland's run up and running again. So it's me personally, it's more about the fact that it ignores the BS attack -3. The isolation immunity is kind of incidental, because a lot of gun pieces and ARO pieces like the Janissary missile launcher has BS attack -3, and it's like the Erland is something I'd send out to get after it. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't have an isolation tool. I'm not too concerned about Miranda as well, because like, okay, cool, you've immobilized him. I'll just reset on a 9. We'll crack on whatever. So, the key component of that Spitfire profile is using it in concert with the Crabbot, and being able to kind of advance whilst also going after objectives as well. So, or using that Crabbot to kind of clear out any mines that might be in his way, on his way to a target, as well. So it's just, yeah, I like it. I can understand people's arguments, but a lot of the times I'll play pretty conservatively anyway, because I don't tend to want to lose it. And I'm aware of what I'm targeting and what I'm aiming to do with it as a result. So in one of the lists I sent you, I've taken the Spitfire because that one's called Old Wisdom, because it's like the tag takes the bigger group 1 pool of orders and gets after shooting stuff, and the smaller pool does all the button pushing and so forth. So it just kind of gives me options, and then like the other one is like a Mark II NCO. So, but
Well, should we take a
yeah,
look at that list then? I'll give you a
yeah,
quick rundown. It's the Ulan with the Spitfire and heavy rocket launcher, a Tech B,
yeah.
2 Fugazi drone bots, a Mule bot, an Auxilia lieutenant, 2 Auxilia forward observers with submachine guns, a Warcore, and then and
Mhm.
that's 9 orders and 1 tactical awareness for the Ulan. And then in group 2, you've got Uma in camo form, Shona, a bolt sniper, a machinist, the NCA version, a blocker, hacker, and a hexer. So yeah,
Yes.
just give us a little talk through how you're going to play with that one.
Um, So largely, Group 1 is kind of designed to support the Erlang with the Tech B being there to give it like an additional dodge and whatever, just as a backup piece in case the machinist does go down. So at least if I need to, I can still put gizmo kits into the Erlang as a result. And she's still a relatively cheap specialist that I could just throw straight into the meat grinder. Hang on, let me grab it up so I can refer to it than going off memory because my memory's shot. So the Auxilia Lieutenant kind of gets just deployed normally or even used as a reserve drop. Fugazis, Mealbots, kind of self-explanatory. Mealbot gets deployed near the blocker in the Harris in Group 2. Auxiliars, the Lieutenant would probably get deployed centrally, just to kind of give as much barrier between like sideways operators. And then the forward observers kind of go on each flank just to give me options going in that way. Warcore does Warcore things. UMA, so Group 2 is where my workhorses in terms of specialists occur. So the Erlang generates that heads down state. It's like they don't really want to face the heavy rocket launcher. So, and the Erlang's going to get deployed first. Like it gets smack bang right in the middle of the deployment zone, and it's like an S6 camo marker in NCA can only be one thing. So UMA gets the resulting effort is between my 3 reserve drops being either Auxilia Lieutenant, UMA, or Shona, will determine like by mission and opponent faction as well, and table generally. So UMA will get squirreled away near a button and then just kind of sit there until I need her to go out and do something or push into a location to kind of clear out the path for the Erlang. Or if UMA can't get in there, Shona goes and does that. So they kind of play off each other and the heads down state provided by the Erlang. So it's a lot about Group 1 supporting Group 2. And then Bolt there is just to kind of give a bit of long range suppression if required and kind of being more of a technical piece. The machinist is obviously there to kind of repair the Erlang if required, because the Erlang can kind of fall back to the Bolt, like under the Bolt's watch. And then the block is just there as a defensive hacker as well, and getting that SD from the Bolt and machinist, and eventually just kind of going. And then the Hexa is again, if needed, I can coordinate shoot with the Bolt and the Hexa as required. I'm getting more comfortable with coordinate shoot because it gives them a fork in that regards, because like everyone's kind of willing to accept the risk of one unit shooting one thing, but multiple units shooting one thing is even worse. So it's very much an old wisdom Group 1 tag with its support, and then the Group 2 specialist workhorses get about doing that. So, and then they just pivot between what I need them to do at any given stage. So if the repeating element, if there's a heavy info war component, this list is designed to operate in that space. So UMA can go back into camouflage, Shona can go out and clear repeaters and stuff like that. And then the blocker's just a fairly hardened defensive hacker. To me, it's just a hardened Fusilier hacker in that regards. Just to kind of be able to repossess the Erlang if I stuff up or overextend or unable to get it back into camo prior to the end of my turn. So, and then the Hexa does Hexa things.
I really like the Hexa in this list. It's kind of you've got the Ulan, you've got a Bolt Sniper. You would so obviously you can't fit in a Swiss Guard, but the Hexa does a pretty good job of replicating the threat of a Swiss Guard and doing not quite the same high water mark, but pretty close.
Yeah, he where I can't use the missile launcher, I'll typically look to put him on the highest peak at like the furthest range bands, and just look to outrange and stacking those mods, and especially if the opponent's got like a TR bot or turrets or whatever, I'll usually roll out the Hexa to get after that, because like BS11 Thunderbolts on a -2, I'm just rolling 2 dice on 13s.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure, I may miss 1 or 2, but they're not hitting anything at all, so they're forced to dodge. In which case, I'm usually, if they dodge prone, cool. But a dodge at -3 with surprise attack is a lot worse than 0 threat to the Hexa in return. So, but yeah, it's just one of those old wisdom builds where the tag kind of goes in and messes stuff up, and everybody else gets to work kind of plugging the gaps where it can't cover the cell itself.
Yeah, I suppose even when you've had, say, if you get your Ulan out there and do a bit of work, and say you, for whatever reason, you don't have enough orders in your group 2, you've still got a couple of forward observers in that group 1, the Auxilia, to just go and, at a later point in the game, if it ends up that way, you've still got something in that group that can just go and do the job that you need doing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice.
So, but yeah. And then that's paired up with the other list, which is a little bit more hackable. But I accept that risk in that instance.
Okay. We've
so
got, I'll just do a quick rundown for it. It's the Red Eye Spitfire, chain rifle, grenade launcher, continuous damage, Shona, a CSU with combi rifle, with a blocker hacker, a blade, engineer, parachutist, decoy 2, which you've already talked about a lot, which I was quite surprised to see. But I'm sure we get into that, with a power bot, a mule bot with a deactivator and repeater, another Hexa sniper, 2 auxilia, 1 is lieutenant, 1 is decoy, a Squallow Mark II with the NCO multi HMG, I guess duoed with the Pathfinder tactical awareness, a Tech B, 2 Fugazi, and a War Core. So this is similarly dangerous, just in different ways.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more prone to combat armies, and hacking because of that profile of it. Because the Red Eye provides a little bit of anti-CC tech for me as a result, because they can't be attacked in close quarters or close combat, so it provides me an element of at least shoring up that defense, and the Pathfinder provides at least a localized sensor barrier around camo and the like. So the Red Eye has always been a favorite since it was introduced into Pano. So by comparison, there's a lot of contention around the value of the Red Eye. What a few people tend to forget is NCA in particular, and Pano by and large, has always had issues prosecuting an attack when the head down state is occurring. They've always been kind of forced to repurpose and re-roll into, if the opponent doesn't give you it's null state. If they go into a null state, you go push buttons to kind of force them to come out and engage with you. Where the Red Eye fundamentally is that fast moving, rapid component that you can get in there and bypass those sight lines and those hard to reach, get into the basically a Colgate toothbrush, hard to reach spots and apply gun to it. The fact that it's only just been boosted with BS14 and sensor is just glorious, because it means that like you can try and hide those camo markers. The grenade launcher continuous damage is a little bit of a vanity pick, because I want to give it a go, because the Blitzen is fairly reliable. The mobility of the Red Eye doesn't necessarily require the spec fire, because it's got the mobility to kind of get to where it needs to see. But just being able to put out a continuous damage template from an alternate angle is very useful. So, and it's fast, which is that component that NCA has really never had. Red Eye, Shona, they've got vertical mobility now as well, especially in UMA.
Yeah, I can attest to the grenade launcher continuous damage sort of threat that it has. I played against a local player of ours, and he brought that, and I was playing Dashat with a Magariba guard, and the Maggie had been a real problem for him, just like road blocking the board, and so he was like, I just have to try this, and yeah, one grenade was enough to completely destroy my tag.
Yeah, exactly. So it's sometimes it's a bit of a swing and miss, but sometimes you just need to identify your outs, and that's what that grenade launcher does. So yes, vertical mobility and speed have always been an issue with NCA. You're always kind of having to rely on your gun to cover distance rapidly, but now we don't necessarily need to do that with Red Eye. The Shona, especially now with the blocker as well. A lot of things are starting to increase in speed to be where it needs to be, and especially with that Blade Engineer in that list, that's where this parachutist comes in vital. So, like, obviously the CSU and blocker kind of work hand in hand. Defensive team again, just keeping that line safe. A lot of it is close quarters defense, because by and large the Hexa is my realistically only ARO in this list, but should be enough to kind of go, hey, especially with putting the Red Eye into suppressive after an attack run, should kind of keep me relatively safe. But it incurs a bit of risk, but this list should be able to handle it. It's more of a designed for close in defense and so forth. So but the Blade Engineer, because it actually he's fairly cheeky, because he still has stealth, he still has decoy. I don't tend to use the decoy. He has an AP submachine gun and an emitter, so he can walk in from an alternate angle and then spend his tactical awareness order. The power bot starts moving up to support where the Mark II is, to kind of pre-position in the event that the Mark II kind of gets caught out. And then I can get after, like, either supporting the Red Eye if it's gone down, or pushing a button, or clearing out an alternate angle as well. And that can be just walked in from the side near an opponent's deployment zone. So he can largely kind of be in a position, as long as I'm cognizant of where I'm finishing up that Red Eye, the Blade can be in a position to actually forward project and support the Red Eye in the event that something goes wrong. And especially with tech recovery on the Red Eye, the Blade's BS13 on his gizmo kits,
it's good,
helps
isn't it?
a lot there. So whilst the Blade's positioning to recover the Red Eye, the power bot's moving to support the Mark II, because the rules allow me to deploy a parachutist and have a power bot connected. But so whilst the Blade's up in the sky, it's disconnected, and then because servants don't have a table-wide coherency, the moment he lands, it reconnects that coherency rule. Okay. So, and then I get to work, and then, like, I've got a tactical awareness. So if everything's gone sideways and I'm like spent with all my orders, I've still got one Hail Mary to pull with that Blade. So because he can spend his regular order landing and then the tactical awareness straight into at least recovering something to kind of maybe get me out of trouble.
Yeah, I really like the inclusion of the Blade parachutist in this list, particularly, like, it's quite an unusual pick, I would say. I've never seen anyone talk about it as a piece to be used. I mean, the sort of common usage is a FTO engineer and tag it onto a tag, and then you can obviously just pick the
Yep.
tag up as soon as it takes any kind of damage. But I
Yep.
have a bit of a soft spot for AD troopers anyway. But I do think
Yeah.
the blade is particularly well suited to this role because it always had that thing I felt as a purely support piece. It was a bit over the top in that it's got SR -1 on its BS attack, mimetism -3, stealth, attack aware, BS 13. Like that is in a lot of factions, that is a gunfighter, like a straight up, this guy's gonna do our gunfighting for us. And you've got this engineer that kind of otherwise is not really doing much because you've got so many better shooters than that. And in this instance with the engineer, it's like, yeah, right, we bring it in, maybe it picks something up, maybe it doesn't, maybe it pushes a button, maybe it doesn't, but it's also then a real genuine threat vector that you can bring in from the side to really scare people.
Yeah, because the submachine gun in the emitter, it's layered range bands. So the emitter cover, the submachine gun goes out to 8 inches, and then you got a flat range band from 8 to 16, and then you've got a 16 to 32 with the emitter. So it's like you can kind of walk in, and with that lateral attack vector, you can catch a few. Hence, my approach with I couldn't quite hack both Victor and Bit, so I'm just going to apply ranged oblivion through the emitter with the blade.
Yeah.
So yeah, yes, I have used the blade in the FTO option with the Mark II before. However, that has caught me out of sorts in a game, BCB 24, I think it is, my very first game of the weekend, and basically because the blade was co-located quite close to the Mark II, it was high incentive to drop a pitcher. So instead of going after the Squallow, he went after the blade.
Yeah, okay.
And then I didn't have an engineer, which is why I've taken the parachuters, because then all they've got to target in that terms of that infrastructure. Sure, they might be able to get it before the Mark II kind of gets into play, but they've kind of got to split their efforts. Like, are we going after the tag or are we going after the red eye or Shona before it can really load up? And then the blade is protected, so all I lose is a 3-point power bot. Cool story. I can still call in a speedball to kind of be emergency recovery, especially before the blade's ready to come in. And then, yeah, the blade is protected. Sure, it's like 6 points more than, 23. It's 10 points more than the standard FTO.
Yeah.
So the blade itself is 7 points, and then add on the power bot, it's 10 points more. But
Yeah, sure.
like the survivability and the options of being able to get after 2 units at once in separate locations, especially if one's over in the opponent's deployment zone, being the red eye, and then the Squallow being in my deployment zone, I can be in 2 places at once at great distances. So, and I can't be targeting until I decide to land that blade. So that infrastructure remains intact until, and that way, like if the Squallow and the red eye are surviving, then I just bring him in and start using that AP submachine gun and emitter to do work as well, so he can re-roll over to being a gunfighter.
Yeah, it feels pretty big. I think we've gone through a lot of the sort of most of the units in the faction, and certainly all the big ones. And I feel like this feels like quite an innovation, if you like, for the faction, that they have this option and that you've identified it, because that is a real classic way to target Pano in general, right? Is you go, okay, well, where's the machinist? I'll just send something to go and kill him, and then all of a sudden the Pano player has to play with a little bit more risk, because it's like, well, I might just lose this face to face. I probably won't, but I might. And then I don't have anything to respond.
We're down that tag, and it's like, well, now I'm out of luck because I have no way of recovering it as well. So especially being like locked down. But this is my approach.
Yeah, especially with the engineer being a parachutist, it's like, well, you could maybe I mean, I know you said you play relatively cautiously, but you could, if you feel
Mm,
it necessary, to just push the envelope a little bit and go, well, I'm going to really go for it and push this
yeah,
piece up. And like, if it goes down, well, okay, that's bad, but I can drop my engineer very close to it, and therefore,
yeah.
I'm going to saving myself that effort, and then you've got more outs in your play where if you feel like you really need to, you can push it a bit more.
So, but yeah, it's all about like approaching how you want to achieve it realistically, and fitting those multiple options and how they support one another. But this is what I'm trialing next in these two lists, just to kind of see where we're going. But there's no one way to play it. I was playing with Richard Quinn for a while there, dropping using a Bolt Spitfire and Richard Quinn. So the Spitfire would go and do gunfighting, and Richard Quinn be dropping disco balls and pushing buttons. So,
Nice.
yeah, that's pretty much it, really. Unless there's any other things that you want to chat about, but that's
We haven't
largely
mentioned. We didn't talk
the
about
update.
the Black Friars. They
Oh
are
yes.
an important piece in MO. Do you use them in NC at all?
Um. So yes, and no. So they are an amazing piece to slot into Fusiliers. Not so much useful in terms of bolt fire teams as such. Um, but they allow you to kind of do that pseudo former like Kamau MSV2 ARO backed up by 4 Fusiliers or 2 Fusiliers and 2 CSUs, and get that MSV2 component, but with the HRL. It's even just like, even if you just use the Thunderbolt as well. So they are quite a good pivot piece. I have put used the Blackfriars in a couple of lists, and especially put him to work against like Shaz, for example, where that multispectral MSV2 and then the heavy rocket launcher just opening up, and it's like, well, I'm just gonna whip 13, discover, and then if I pass, I get a heavy rocket launcher onto your head, for example. So I have used them. BS13 is solid. Their Whip 13 is solid. Like the fact that they've got Combat Instinct and Albedo -6 with an MSV2 is fairly good to go. Especially they'd probably operate a bit better in NCA compared to, like, say, for example, MO, purely because Fusiliers are quite cheap and they have a variety of functions and roles. Because like you can take, in that instance, you can take a Fusilier, especially if you want to take your old style like 5-man core. You take your Fusilier LT, your Fusilier decoy, your Fusilier paramedic, and a choice of either, like my personal preference is like a Fusilier hacker, um, at least in the old fashion, because then it's a 6 cents hacker in that
Oh yeah.
regards. But now you kind of need a 5-man, and then you maybe just take the blocker hacker because it still has sensor. It's still got a level of capability to respond to those threats, and then you've got a MSV2 Blackfriar as a main ARO piece. So you can kind of follow the pattern of all the other factions with the Kamau, the Kahu, what's the other one? The Bag, Marie, and the
Yeah.
like. So they've got the same building blocks in that regards. It's just different flavors of it.
Cool.
But yeah,
Okay.
that's
Nice.
pretty much it.
Well, I think that's it for me. Any
Yep.
final thoughts or reflections about NCA that you'd like to share?
Alex is wrong about the Erland being absolutely stupid good. It could do with a few extra things, me personally.
Few
But that's
extra
just me
things.
taking it. Yeah, that's just me taking the piss out of Annex.
Yeah,
So
okay. Shout out
it's all
to
good.
Annex and Readers who's on the Discord chatting about how good things are in Pano quite a lot.
But yeah, apart from that, I've got nothing else. NCA has probably been in his best spot, has been, and there's a lot of depth and options that you can take. And my way of playing is not necessarily somebody else's way of playing. So some people prefer other profiles compared to me. Like I want to try the double Swiss missile launcher and double clipper guided remote, and then grab Hannibal for that extra swick, and then take 2 blockers. But that's just me. I don't know if it'd be good, but it'd be an experience for at least one game. That's for certain.
It definitely would.
And just cool. Yeah. Just for that one game, and then I'd probably move on to something a bit more stable.
Live that degenerate life for one match.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Trent. It was very interesting, and I, for one, am very keen to play NCA. It seems a lot of fun.
In a really good spot lately.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Whiptail podcast. My name's Thomas, and I'll see you next time.